All right, everybody, good morning and welcome back to the free agency grind. And today is going to be about the defensive line. Today is going to be addressing potential needs for the Seahawks on the DL. And before we get into the players here, we're going to, of course, start at the top and work our way down throughout the day, is the plan. Let's talk about the Seahawks defensive line as of right now. As of this moment, under contract on the Seattle Seahawks at the defensive end position. And when I say defensive end, I'm talking about the 3-4 defensive ends because we ran a 3-4 last year, or technically a 3-4. And Mike Macdonald ran a 3-4 in Baltimore, and if he's bringing his defense over, it's going to continue to be a 3-4. Probably a very different looking 3-4. But the point I'm trying to make is that this video is not going to be about edge rushers. We're going to be talking instead about the 4-eye or 3-tech defensive linemen, because the 3-techs are in a 4-3, but they can typically transition fairly well to playing end in a 3-4 defense. So understand that this video is not going to be about the guys who are rushing off the edge. We will talk about that in a future video, but this video, we're going to focus in on the guys on the line. So these are the guys who are typically at least 280 pounds. They can go up above 300. Usually I don't think they get much heavier than like 310. Occasionally you'll get a guy like Akeem Hicks who was like 335 and was able to get by, but these are the guys who are typically more about trying to take up space in the middle. Now, as of right now, the Seahawks have two 3-4 ends on the roster. Dre'Mont Jones, who this is probably his last year here, unless he has a monster season. And Mike Morris, who played 15 snaps last year, and then he got hurt and was a rookie, so that was the only time he had ever played in the NFL. So, as of this moment, it's pretty dry. It's pretty bad. We need depth, and we probably need an infusion of star or even superstar talent. Now, most people correctly assume that the Seahawks will retain Leonard Williams, and if we do that, then that changes things dramatically. We don't need star power at the defensive end position if we retain Leonard, because he is the star. And then you have Dre'Mont as your second defensive end, and you have Mike Morris coming off the bench. You can retain somebody like Miles Adams, maybe. After the Seahawks are done with their outgoing free agents, it is very likely that this position will not be a pressing need. But as of right now, it is. And I'm going to speak about it as if we are not getting Leonard Williams back, because that is a possibility. So we need to address this potential concern as if Leonard Williams is not something we take for granted. So this video is going to focus in on the big guns in free agency this year at the position. And once we talk about what we need to talk about, we will move down through the more not the star players, not the guys who are going to cost a ton of money, and those might be guys who are a little more realistic to bring in for depth behind Dre'Mont and Leonard Williams. So, if the Seahawks do not bring back Leonard Williams and decide instead they want to spend big in free agency to get a player from another team, there are three big ticket options. The first one is, of course, Chris Jones. This is the grand poobah of interior defensive linemen available this offseason. So he's on top of the world right now. He's been making all-pro teams. He's been making Pro Bowls. He's been winning Super Bowls. He's done it all. A couple years ago, he even finished third in Defensive Player of the Year. Over the last 2 years, despite missing one game last year, actually, he has 26 total sacks as an interior defensive lineman. He's the king right now. He is the absolute undisputed king of free agent defensive linemen. So, not taking anything away from him as a player. He is a beast. Now, the last several years, the last 5 years, in fact, every year he's made the Pro Bowl, he's been playing in a 4-3 as a defensive tackle, basically like a 3-tech. But if you go back to before the Pro Bowl started to hit, under, I believe his name was Bob Sutton, the defensive coordinator in Kansas City, he was playing in a 3-4. And his big breakout season in 2018, where he had 15 and a half sacks, the season that made him notable as a superstar player on the rise, that was in a 3-4. So he can probably do it. And generally speaking, I think that if you're a good 3-tech, you're probably going to be able to be perfectly fine as a 4-eye defensive end in a 3-4. There are exceptions. I don't believe Chris Jones would be an exception. PFF also, of course, very positive on him. We're very high on his 2023 season. You go back to 2022, they're even more high on it, which makes sense because he was better that year. But this guy is most certainly peaking as a player. However, we have to be wary here. He's about to turn 30. He's going to turn 30 in July. We know what happens to players when they get to 30. We can also take a look at these numbers and see that his best years came in the years where he was playing for a contract. 2018, that was the first. The 2019 offseason was the first offseason where he was eligible for a new contract, and he explodes for 15 and a half sacks. Last year, 2 years ago, he thought he was playing for a contract, 15 and a half sacks. And then this year, when he knew he was playing for a contract because he was playing on the modified tag, 10 and a half sacks. So we've seen this guy have his level of production oscillate a little bit based on whether or not he thinks he's about to get paid. So maybe you're a little bit worried about what happens when he does get paid. By the way, if you want to pay him, it looks like you're going to have to pay him way more than you would have to pay a guy like Leonard Williams, which makes sense because he's better than Leonard Williams. But as of right now, Spotrac has 3 years, $85.5 million. $85.5 million. That is $28.4 million a year. And with the recent news about the salary cap going up from expectations, I think that there is a very good chance that this ends up being more like $30 million a year. So 3 years, $90 million for Chris Jones when he's about to turn 30. When you know his best years are probably behind him, like the last 2 years are probably peak Chris Jones. I don't know. I wouldn't dislike it because he is such a good player, and I'm sure he'll continue to be a good player for a while. This isn't an Aaron Donald situation where Aaron Donald is undersized, so therefore I feel like he won't age well. Chris Jones will probably age better than that, but I think you can do better. I'd rather keep Leonard Williams at his price than Chris Jones at his price. All right, so going back to the list here, the next big ticket item on our list here should be Christian Wilkins. And this guy's coming off a rookie deal, so he's really going to be looking to get paid. He's just a couple months into his 28th season on this planet, or 28th year on this planet, so he's still relatively young, entering his prime. And if you consider his 2023 season to be the year he was entering his prime, it's a good prime. This guy plays the run extremely well, and in 2023 developed into an excellent pass rusher with 9 sacks in 17 games. This is a guy who obviously isn't going to get paid like Chris Jones because Chris Jones is on top of the world right now, but this is an excellent player who would slot in very well in the Seahawks' new defense. This is a guy who's played in a 3-4 pretty much every year of his career. 2019 was the only year the Dolphins ran a 4-3, so he's very familiar with the 3-4 defense. And yeah, there isn't too much I can take away from him. He's a little bit younger. He's about the same size as a Chris Jones, former first-round pick, so the pedigree is there. Like, there's no looking at him and thinking, oh, he's just a product of the system. He's just a product of his coaches. No, this guy's really, really good. In fact, you go back to 2022, the numbers aren't quite as high, but look at how much PFF likes what he's doing in terms of run defense. So this is a two-way player, a guy who can play every down and be relatively dominant for you. So Christian Wilkins, I think, is a little more appealing, partially because he's going to cost less. Spotrac says 4 years, $81 million. That's about $20.2 million a year. The cap went up, so maybe you're looking at more like $21, $22 million a year. It would be a decent amount more than I think we're going to give Leonard. But at the same time, I think we have to explore the possibility that he's worth more because he's younger. He's probably a better player even as of right now. And he's also probably going to continue to be very well-rounded. This is not a one-dimensional pass rusher, a one-dimensional run stuffer. This is a guy who can do both. Now, like with Chris Jones, I should raise the point that he was not a big-time sack guy until 2023, which was the year he was playing for a contract. In fact, he nearly doubled his career high in QB pressures in 2023. So I don't know if you're going to get that experience if you give him the big extension, but I do think that he's a very good player, even independent of the elite pass rush. So Christian Wilkins, I think, is a little more intriguing than Chris Jones, just because he's younger and should be a good deal cheaper. I can't imagine him getting more than like $22 million a year. And the final guy I want to look at in this video, and the final guy I would consider to be a big ticket player at this position, would be way down the list here because he wasn't a highly touted player coming out of college, Justin Madubuike. And this guy is really interesting for us, or Madubuike is actually how you pronounce it, excuse me. Thank you, PFR. He played under Mike Macdonald in Baltimore. So he made the Pro Bowl in 2023, big breakout year for him. Got some Defensive Player of the Year votes, made the second team All-Pro. It was a monster year for him. He's young. He just turned 26. He's going on 27 here. He'll turn 27 about mid-season. So age is not a concern at all when it comes to Madubuike. And you take a look at where it seems like his career might be headed. This might be the train to get on here. And you take a look at PFF, they were pretty praiseful of his 2023, 75.1 grade total. You go back to previous years, obviously not nearly as good, so you can see the improvement. You can see the levels to which he is taking his game up to the next level. He's approximately the same size as the Chris Joneses and Christian Wilkinses of the world. So Justin Madubuike is certainly a strong candidate to go after, not only because of his elite play, but also because of his familiarity with our new head coach. So don't be surprised if this guy gets involved in the mix as well. Again, it can only really happen if we don't bring back Leonard Williams, so there needs to be a little bit of an if-or gate we need to cross before we can say anything about this. But if Leonard Williams slips through our fingers, Madubuike might be the guy to replace him just because McDonald gets to say, hey, I know that guy. I know how good he is. I've been working on him for years, and now look what he's become. You're probably looking at something similar to what Christian Wilkins is going to get. Spotrac has basically the identical contract. Again, the cap went up, so maybe it's going to be 21 mil or 22 mil a year. But again, this guy's much younger than Leonard Williams. So is he worth paying a few $1 million extra a year? I think you can make a pretty strong argument for it. I think you can make a very compelling argument for it. The concerns would be, once again, the guy didn't really break out and become a star player / superstar player until his contract year. Like 2022, he was fine, but 5.5 sacks, 42 tackles, anchoring a really good defense. 2021, 2 sacks, 36 tackles, not a big-time player yet at all. And then 2023, he's anchoring the best defense in football, 13 sacks. It has to raise your suspicions a little bit that he suddenly becomes this elite player when he's playing for a new deal. Now, I would point out the fact that he was young, right? He was 26 this most recent year. You wouldn't expect an interior defensive lineman to just be able to completely dominate the game at 25 or 24 or 23, so I think it's understandable that he took a little while to break out. But this is still going to raise some alarm bells before you give him 80 mil, 90 mil, or whatever it ends up being. I think it will be probably somewhere around 4 years, 85 million, something like that. And I'm not against it. I'm just aware of the fact that this does come with some red flags. So those are the 3 big ones that you could go after as the Seattle Seahawks if you save the money by not bringing back Leonard Williams. And all 3 of these guys would be more expensive than Leonard. I do think they'd be better than Leonard. So you're just going to have to weigh that in your mind to decide if you think the extra cost is worth the extra quality play. See you guys later. More videos coming soon. Go Hawks.